minding my own business.
No, it is a fundamental question that needs to be asked, as well as it is a fundamental question that needs to be answered. Again, and basing from my experience in working in this issue with First Nations people, the communities, what we really see are what are those implications for our First Nations youth when they leave their adopted or foster homes. Well, just to add to what Dr. Saylor has said, is that it's that dispossession and the displacement of your identity. So absolutely, there is that identity crisis, number one. Then we're also going to see that intergenerational trauma, because they're going to carry that into their adulthood as well. But when we look at dispossession and displacement of culture, there's that loss of identity, the loss of their heritage, their language, their culture, their family, their community, and their nation. They don't know where to go. In the same way as what our residential school survivors, what they experienced. And this afternoon, you will have that opportunity to hear from 3 residential school survivors themselves, first generation, the experience that they endured in these schools as children. When we look at children in the foster care system, it's the same thing. They will tell you, I know, I see my brown skin, I see my brown eyes, I see my black hair, but I don't know who I am. And they long to learn about who they are, and it's their birthright to be who they are as First Nations people. That fundamental gift that was given to us by the Creator, who we are as Ongohongwe or Anishinaabe or Lakota or Deneta. It is their birthright. So they will experience this cultural dispossession. They will experience this identity crisis. And also, our research shows us that many of our children that are in the foster care system or in adopted homes, that is the passport to the criminal justice system. And I'm telling you this based on my work as a lawyer. And I'm also telling you this based on the fundamental research that Patricia Montour did during her lifetime with children in care. The child welfare system feeds the youth and adult penal system. We're really seeing how our youth are going into prison. 50% of Aboriginal population, and I have the stats with you, and I must apologize, I have to go to my notes, because every now and then I will get a menopausal moment that I forget. So I apologize that I have to go to my notes. But our reports reveal that many Aboriginal children in the child welfare system go on to become young offenders, eventually working their way through the criminal justice system. 50.4% of Aboriginal people in jail are under 30 years old. Over 40% of Aboriginal people in jail are under 25%. Aboriginal children are the fastest growing demographic, and at a time that the country faces a potential, or now it's a labor shortage, as the baby boom generation retires, I say it's in everyone's interest to focus on the positive investments that will reduce poverty and improve high school and post-secondary success rates for our Aboriginal children and youth. If our children graduate to the correction systems, then what hope is it for our future? And what legacy do we have? So you see what this system, the child welfare system, it does feed the penal system. And it is a passport. And we have to find those mechanisms to further prevent this. But it all relates to the lack of resources and supports, which we eloquently had learned from my learned friend here. Without the adequate resources or support that communities will have to repatriate their lost children, because we want our children back. It's not because we don't want our children or we can't take care of our children. Many times our families and our communities have no choice but to send their children away to hospitals. Our children are taken from us from the reserves and sent over into urban areas, whereby they can have access to health care, have access to medical care. Jordan Anderson. How many of you have heard of Jordan Anderson? That was such a good for you, and I'm glad you have. And for those of you that don't, please go and learn about it. There was such a sad state of affairs for this young boy. He was born with severe medical problems. The reserve didn't have, the parents and the community did not have the access to provide for this sick baby, nor his family. So he was removed from his northern Manitoba remote reserve and sent into the Winnipeg hospital. That young boy never saw a day of his life with his family because the provincial government and the federal government were too busy arguing who had the jurisdiction over this child. The federal government said child welfare is the authority of the provincial government. The provincial government said status Indian children is the responsibility of the federal government. So this child was bounced back and forth in this jurisdictional dispute because it was all about money. But rather than take that resource, the funding, and put it into the communities to develop the capacity, to develop the kind of resources that they needed to provide that adequate medical care that this baby needed, no, they were too busy arguing about how much it cost to keep this Indian baby. That child died, and he never saw a day of his life with his family and in his community. And there was a public outcry, and it went to Parliament, and every party in Parliament supported Jordan Anderson's principle that no Indian child would go without the adequate medical care and resources. Every member in that House of Commons stood to support. It has not been implemented to date. Jordan's mother died of a broken heart. They found her dead in a bus stop in the city of Winnipeg, and she had no other alternative or recourse but to drink herself to death. These are realities. This is just one reality I'm sharing with you. But these are true, and they are happening to our children. You can learn about all the stats. You can learn about all the policies. But you need to learn about the realities that are going on right now out there. I don't want to see any more parents suffering like this or children dying. Last week or 2 weeks ago, Aboriginal People's Television Network gave a documentary called Matthew. And I forget his last name, but it relates to a First Nation boy, Maddie. He's 21 years old in Saskatchewan. He was born with severe disabilities, FAS, cerebral palsy. His mother couldn't take care of him, so she put him up into the child welfare system because that was the only place he could find care. And he was fostered by loving Canadian couple. And they loved that little boy loving him into a man. But when he turned 18 years old, the Department of Indian Affairs, Health Canada, said we're not responsible for him anymore because he's now an adult, even though he's at the capacity of a 3-year-old because of his severe disabilities, his health issues. They put him in a group home to be severely beaten. The foster parents went together and they put their house up for sale. They took him back home. They're fighting to this day for the provincial government of Saskatchewan to provide them with the capacity and the resources that they need to give this man a home, this young boy. They love him. But he's being bounced back and forth again between the federal government and the provincial government. Status Indians responsibility of the federal government. Child welfare, responsibility of provincial government. It's all about money again. It's more than about money, it's about human lives. We want our children to have a good life, like everybody else. It is said in our teaching, one of the most sacred teachings is that our children are sacred gifts from the Creator. They are our future, they are our life. Every child, no matter what color that child is, no matter what race that child comes from, deserves love and life in the best way. And I ask nothing more for my children, my First Nation children, my relatives, to give them that life, to give them the best care that they need, and not to treat them as a statistic, and not to treat them as a burden on the taxpayer. It has to stop. Government has to stop quarreling and has to stop making an issue of how costly our children are, and yet they must provide what is needed. Policies have to change. Laws have to change. The federal government has a fiduciary obligation owed to First Nations people, and they created that when they enacted Section 9124 of the British North American Act of 1867, a trust relationship. It is a high duty of care, but they're not living up to it. So I plead with you, please read more about Jordan's principle, read more about Maddie, and if there's anything that you can do to make that change, please do so. Please. Miigwech.
I'm going to ask everybody